this is a demonstration of how to make a very simple slab pot. Obviously, if you're making a slab pot, the thing that you need first of all is a template, and I've made one here. This is the shape of the pot that I'm going to make. Quite a simple shape, and this slab pot, both sides of the slab pot will be the same. So this is the most simple way of actually doing this kind of piece of work, and I want to show you how to do that now. I've got clay already rolled out. It's about 1/4 of an inch thick, and I think that's about 6 millimeters in new money. And then if we put the template on the clay, and we're going to cut round that. We use a potter's knife for doing that. That's one of these. Nice thin blade, nice and sharp. When you're holding this knife, make sure that you hold it vertically when you're cutting around your template like this. Don't hold it at an angle. So I'm going to cut around this template now. So as carefully as possible. You don't have to do it all in one bit. You can cut pieces off and then just move them out. You don't have to, as I say, you don't have to go all the way around all in one go. So cut around this bit on the top. Now nice and carefully round from that point. Round the round bit there. Down here. This side, around there. Notice how I'm trying to keep the knife blade vertical, and then down here. The last bit, the base of the pot, I'm actually going to use a set square. You could use a ruler for this. Because obviously the pot's going to stand on something, it's really important that we get the base of the pot straight. So I'm going to cut that straight across like that using a guide. I can then take all the spare clay off, this off, and we've got one side cut like that. Alright, this clay is quite firm. It was rolled yesterday, left overnight to firm up on the desks, so some of the moisture's gone out of it. It makes the thing much easier to handle. Next thing, obviously it's a slab pot, so we need two sides, so we're going to do another one. Put the template on again. Obviously, you know, you can see, is it possible to get one out of that piece? No, it's not. Obviously it cuts down on work if you can do that, but I've got another job for that piece of clay later on anyway. Then I'm going to cut round this again, just like I did last time. And this bit here. So that's my other side. There are the two sides that we're going to need to make the pot with. Two identical sides. Now, this bit, when we're using, or when you're producing things around this size, they obviously need a wall that keeps these things apart, and I find that using one of these gives walls that are the right width. These rulers are 6 centimeters wide, and it's a good proportion for something of this sort of height. So with this, you just put the ruler on, cut at one side. Again, make sure you keep the knife blade vertical. Cut at the other side, and then the second one like that. Just put that to one side, and we have the walls that will keep the two sides of the pot apart from each other. Is that one going to be long enough? Yes, it is. Right, we're ready to start to put this thing together now, and we use two boards to do this. The first one, obviously, we put down, and we put one side of our pot on the board. Don't worry about the idea of an inside or an outside, because both sides are the same. It doesn't actually matter. We always construct actually on a board because it means moving the things much easier. There's no real need for the wall to follow the exact shape of the piece. As long as it roughly follows it, that's fine. So I'm going to mark on here with my knife very lightly where I want the walls to go. So they're going to go down here, just a little into there, and down to the base. Then on this side, much the same kind of idea, around there and down to the base. Those are the lines that I'm going to do. I'm going to sit down now because it's a little easier to do this job sitting down. And on the inside of that line that I've just described, I'm going to score with my knife because this is where the wall is going to go. So I don't know whether you can see that, Stephen. I'm sure you can. I'm doing this as quickly as possible because it's not the most interesting thing in the world to watch. And then scribe down there. These walls that I've just cut are actually going to fit on the inside of that line where I've scribed. By doing this, it helps the slip that we're going to put on the clay, which is used, it works a bit like glue, to actually stick because it allows the moisture to go into the clay that we've got. I'm then going to take one of these, check that it's long enough, it is, and I'm actually going to score along the top of that as well. Because these are the two faces that are going to stick together. It's a general rule of thumb that whenever you stick two pieces of clay together, you should score and slip them. Obviously, like all rules, there are exceptions, but if you work along that premise, you probably won't go far wrong. It's probably safer to do that rather than not do it. Then, in here I've got some slip. Slip is just the same kind of clay as that I'm using. It's just watery, it's really sloppy, got lots of water in it. And as I say, this works a bit like a glue. So, I'm just going to paint the slip onto the wall there. You don't have to be too neat and careful about this. It doesn't matter if it oozes out the side because we always take it off at the end. Make sure you put enough on, like that. Then we're ready to join that onto the pot here. Let's move that out of the way. So we take the wall and we line it up with the line and the scoring that we've put on around the bend there, and then back on there. Okay, try and make sure you get it exactly where you want. A good tip is to try and move it backwards and forwards like that. This helps it stick. If you try and rock it backwards and forwards, you will feel it actually stick, one piece of clay stick to the next. You can see that slip has oozed out of there. Just use your finger to kind of take that away like that, and the same on the outside. Don't worry about doing anything else at the moment, and that's perfect. That's exactly where we want it. It's really important as well that this wall is vertical, that it's perpendicular. That means at 90 degrees to the flat bit, so it's not, if I can show on this one, it's not kind of leaning over like that, or it's not kinked. It's actually perpendicular to the flat base that we've put it on. We then have to cut it to length, and a good way of making sure that you do this, it's really important at the bottom, because if we cut this at an angle, when the pot stands up, it'll lean over. So I like to use a set square, and if you put the set square on the board there like that, and then cut down, obviously against the square, you know that that will be a 90-degree angle there. And again, I'm going to do that at the top. Put the square on and cut down like that. And we know that again, that will fit that one there. Right, next bit. I've got some soft clay here. This just happens to be a coil. It doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be a coil, it just needs to be soft. It's softer than this clay, but obviously harder than the slip. And I'm going to roll that on the desk to make it much thinner, like this. Now you can see that this isn't the length to go the full length of this bit, but actually when I push it into the joint, it will stretch it, and you will see that this bit, there's more than enough here to go all the way down. And what we do is we push it into the joint there and really push it right in like that, all the way down, push it right down in there. Don't worry too much about it looking all neat so far, and make sure there's not too much on. And I'm getting to the end there, and I've still got that amount left over. When you've got it in there, and I think you can see what that looks like at the moment, you can then just take your finger end and run that down that joint like that to make it nice and smooth. You probably get some excess clay off on your finger, that doesn't matter. Make sure that we haven't got any cracks, and then we'll know that that's well joined onto there. And obviously if you do it on the outside, it's a good idea to do it on the inside as well. Right, we put a coil on the outside, we're going to do exactly the same on the inside. Roll the clay out so it's nice and thin, and again push that right into that joint there. And as you push it in, you will stretch the clay, and so that small length there will go almost to the end, a little bit more needed, there, like that. And then run your finger down it, make it nice and smooth, and up there as well. So that's the first wall on. Second one is there. We need to score the top of it, which we're going to do in exactly the same way as we did the other one. Then slip. Top. Then we have to follow the line that we made at the top, bend the ball around, remembering to keep it perpendicular, like that, to the base, stick it right down, make sure it's in the right place, give it a little wiggle backwards and forwards, that makes sure it's stuck, make sure it's vertical, yes it is. Use your finger to remove any excess slip that's oozed out the side. Same on the inside. It's very important that you do that, because otherwise when you're trying to put your coil on, it will slide and slip and you end up with a mess. And then we're going to use our set square on the base there. Put it on the board. Cut down with the knife. Like that. And the same at the top. Put that on there, and I'm going to cut this at an angle so it's at the same angle as the actual top of the pot, like this. I'll turn it around so you can see that. You can see that that's been cut at an angle like that so that it matches the angle at the top of the pot. Then, a bit more soft clay. Roll it out. Again, it doesn't matter whether you do the outside or the inside first. I'm just going to stand up for this. Push that right in there. And stretch that clay. Like that. Right the way down. Tiny bit left this time. Just go around down it with your finger, make sure that's joined on properly. Okay, and the last one is on the outside. Bit more clay, roll it out, like that, and again push that right into that joint and stretch that clay up the length of the wall. Okay, that's lovely. Right, so there's one side of the pot with 2 walls put on. That's ready for the other side to go on top. Now, this pot that I'm making is quite tall and narrow. Its proportions are taller and narrower than some that you might want to make. If you were making something that was much wider, and if your clay was a little soft, what you can do is you can scrumple newspaper up and just lay it gently inside there, so that when you put the second piece of clay on, it doesn't sag. This one won't sag because the walls are actually quite close together and the clay is quite firm, but that's always a tip that you can bear in mind. It does make things slightly more difficult, but don't worry about that. And you can leave the newspaper in the thing, and it can be fired with newspaper in, and the newspaper just burns away. So again, it's something that you might need to think about if you've got a wider pot with a bigger area that's unsupported. Another way to support clay, if it's like that, is if you've got any scrap spare wall, you can always just place them gently like this, because obviously it's the same height there, so that would support across there. I'll show you perhaps what I mean when I do this. Next bit obviously is to score along the top of these walls here. Now this time it's impossible to decide where these walls will touch that, so you can only score at one side. So this is a little bit of a compromise, but in my experience it will work, so don't worry about it. So we score carefully along one side there, and we score along the other side. Remember that this bit here is just a support, so we're not actually going to stick that in at this stage. We're not going to stick it in at all, but it doesn't stay in, so that will get taken out when we put the top on. Right, again the usual slip along the top here. Like that. And the other side. It's better to put too much on than not enough. You can always take it off afterwards. For the other side. The most important part of all this is that we line the base up, so that the base must be exactly in line with this bit here. Take that out, hold my set square there. The base has got to be in line with that. Again, otherwise the thing won't stand straight. I'm just going to pop that back in again. I'm going to take my next bit of clay, and this has got to line up exactly on top of the first one, like that. Okay, which that one has done quite nicely. It just needs to move down here a bit, so I'm just going to push that down. It'll slide on the slip. Press it down like that. Overhand there. Push down. That's coming. See where that support there is coming in really useful, like that. Then we need to turn this over. This is where you need a second board. We'll put that on top like that. Make a sandwich. Board, pot, and another board. Lift it up. Hand on top. Flip it over like that. So that the side we now want to work on is down on the board, and you can see there's some excess slip there, so I'm just going to use my finger to get rid of that. Put it back in the pot, and on this one down here like that, and then guess what, back to the soft clay again. Roll that out. This should be enough. Now, keep your hand on the top, because obviously we're going to push into this joint down here. If we apply some pressure on the top, when we're pushing there, it will stop us pushing that wall in. You can see how that will move if we really push on it too hard. With this, you've got to be firm but sort of gentle at the same time, Not be frightened of doing this. So we're going to put this in. I'm just going to get there so it catches, and then follow the joint up there, just like we did on the last one. Obviously the main difference here is you can't get your hand inside, or only partially inside, to support it. So I'm going to support it at this bit here, like that, and then run my finger up the joint. So this time though, this is just on the outside. If you remember on the other one we did the outside and the inside. This is where it becomes a little bit difficult. So what we do, or what we tend to do, is just actually put some clay as far down as you can reach with your finger. So I can get down a fair way. If you've got really small hands, this is where they come in quite handy. So you can get down there. I'm just going to trim this top a little bit as well. So we've got a bit of an overhang there. Spin that around so that I can get my hand inside from the bottom. Take a small piece of clay as far as you can reach and just work it into the joint at the bottom. This is not for aesthetic reasons, it's not for the way it looks, it's just so that it won't fall apart. Like that. Okay. Then, other side, same again. Pull that out. Hand on top. Remember, perhaps even put your finger on the inside, just so that you're not going to push that wall in, and then work that bit of clay down there. Okay, and then this time I'm just going to squeeze that there, and then work that up. Using my finger end just to join that onto the wall rather than kind of going down, because it will push the wall, so you do need to be careful with this. Try and keep everything as neat as possible, because if you keep it neat like at this point, it means that you won't have to neaten it up later. Okay, and I can just see down here as well, and I'm going to put a little bit of clay in there as far down as I can actually get my hand in, just so that it keeps it nice and strong, and it does actually look better because it means that both sides will match as far as you can actually see anyway. Alright, like that. Now, if you've done that properly, we can then take out that bit. Remember, we kept that in for supporting that bit of wall there. And if that's all been done properly, we can actually stand the pot up now like that. Okay? And it will stand, let's hope, that's vertical. A little bit of a lean, so I'm just going to knock it like that. Then you can just very, very carefully with your finger make sure that all the joints at the top are nice and neat. You haven't got any bits of raggy coil hanging out, and that the thing is looking good. Yes, it is. Just take that away from there, and that away from there. The last thing we need now, obviously, is a base on this. So we'll just move that to one side for a moment, and this time we can get rid of the board and we can go back to working on the desk. What we're going to do is take our pot and we're going to lay it down on the desk, but so that the actual base of it overlaps the edge of the desk. You can do this on a board as well, it doesn't really matter. And using the knife, we're going to score all the way around the base. So that's at both walls here, or both sides, and then also down the walls that keep the sides apart. The reason for having it hanging over the desk is, or over a board, is that when you come to put the slip on, you're not going to paint slip all over the desk or all over your board. It means that it will only actually go on the walls, which is where we want it. Slip again, paint that on. Make sure we've got plenty on. Got a bit of clay there, a piece of slab left, which was left over from when I cut one of the sides, which rather more than you would need. But we're going to place this on, pick it up carefully, place it on like this, and just move it backwards and forwards like this, very gently, and you will feel that it will stick. That's really stuck firm there now. Right, so this is stuck on here now. We can see that the walls have kind of bent in a little bit, bowed in. If that's the case, you take a stick like this, just push it into, put it into the pot, and just push the wall out so that it is flat, like that. It's important that you do this at this stage because we're going to cut round the base. And we want to make sure that the base is the right size. Okay, I'm happy with that. Just going to take the excess slip off from around the edge, my finger, like this. Now, this is quite crucial that you get this next bit right. We're going to cut along here, and we're going to hold the knife at an angle like this, obviously wider away from the pot and then tapering away. So I would say around, certainly no more than 2 millimeters from the bottom of the pot, and I'm going to cut along there parallel to the wall like that. Let's cut that bit off, that's scrap. You then going to cut across here and cut into this shape here as well, so that it has like two sort of sticky out feet. Cut down there, move that one round. Again, no more than 2 millimeters and at an angle like that. Take that off. There, in there, and down there. Right, now then, this clay down here has to be joined into this wall. If you leave too much on, the bottom of the pot will have like it'll look like a sort of elephant's foot, not very nice. So that's why you can't leave too much. You've got to leave some clay for the joint, but not too much. And then what you do is you can put your stick back in and hold it really tight so that you've got something to push against, and we just scoop that clay up like that into the side of the pot. You do it quite roughly first and then go back and neaten it up afterwards. So I've made a joint there and you can see that, and I'm going to run my finger across. And again, obviously these little bits at the end, very simple. I'll move that out of the way. Just join those on, and then up here, like that. Okay. These are the hardest bits, the flat sides. If you push too hard, you'll push that in and it's very difficult to get out. So again, keep a stick in so you've got something to push against, and just move that clay up with your finger end like that into the side of the pot. Again, if you've got too much slip on here, it will be a bit gooey and a bit horrible, so make sure there's not lots of slip hanging out, and then just go along there, smooth that, and then onto the last bit here. Just going to join those on, this bit here. Now notice for this, that apart from a knife, the only tools I've used are the ones that live on the ends of my arms. They're the best tools for the job. You can feel with these. If you use modelling tools and things, you can't feel what you're doing. Your fingers are most definitely the best for this sort of thing. Right, that's joined on. I'm now going to get my board back, take the stick out, lay this down on the board carefully, and then I can actually just smooth this a little bit more like this, and really carefully just work that clay into the side of the pot so that you can't actually see the join. That's the idea. And also it will make for a very strong piece. If you ever want to turn a pot over, the easiest way, because it's less handling, put the board on, flip it over, take that one off, and again just join that on like that. That sounds looking good. And that we can then use our fingers just to smooth the edges, get them nice and crisp, and that's almost ready for decoration, which we'll cover in another clip later. But that's the straightforward, very simple way of actually making a slab pot. One last thing that we do, probably when you've actually finished the decoration though, but I'll do it now, is if we take a knife and we hold it at an angle about 45 degrees and just cut a tiny sliver of clay off the bottom like this on both sides, it makes the thing look as if it's sort of floating slightly above the desk, which I think gives a really nice finish to the thing. Okay, like that. Smooth out with the finger, and that really is now ready to decorate, either by carving or incising or applying clay to it, depending on whatever design you're working to. Obviously the shapes for these are endless. I mean, we can make all kinds of things using this method, and I'm going to show you one or two of those in a second. Right, I've got a series of completed slab pots here to show you, to help explain what the possibilities with this method of making things are. The first one's the simplest one. It's exactly like this in a way, in that both sides of the pot, the shape of both sides of the pot are exactly the same. So you can see that that shape there follows exactly the same as the other side. The decoration on it also is the same. So the person that made this has used, it's a Picasso image, or Picasso images, that have been incised or carved into the clay. Then oxide wash has been rubbed in, and then it's had a glaze put on top. And this side is exactly the same as that. So it's the first kind of level, I suppose, really, of decoration where both sides are the same, both sides are the same shape, and the decoration is the same on both sides as well. But it's still a very pleasing piece, a very nice pot, and very successful for that. The second piece that I've got to show you is decorated in a pop art style. Now, what makes this different to our piece that we've just made is that the sides of the pot are different themselves, the shapes are different. So we've got this shape here, and then we've got this shape here as well, which is completely different, as you can see. If you ignore the decoration for a minute and think about the shapes, if you do this, if you adopt this method of making, you've got slightly different things to think about than you have with this. Obviously when we made this, we could lay one side down, scribe really roughly around the outside of it where the wall needs to go, or the walls need to go, and then just place the second side on top. With this it's a bit more difficult because the two pieces are different. So you can't necessarily go around the outside on something like this. So you can see, if I hold this up to the camera, that this one, the actual sort of aperture, the hole in the top, or the bit that actually makes it a vessel, is actually smaller, so that these things are set well in from the edge of the walls. If you're going to do this kind of method, or use this sort of method, what you need to do is take your two templates, because obviously with this you've got two different templates, that's back to this, and you've got to put your templates together and work out a common place where the walls can go so they're not going to stick out at either side. So you can see that actually makes for quite a different sort of look to something, because when you're decorating it, you've not only got to think of the side or the flat that you're looking at, but the back of the other one, which sometimes you can see through that. So this person's done a really nice job on this. It's been incised, the decoration. It's had wash put in and then underglaze colours, which are these bright colours, with a glaze on top. But what this person missed, you know, they missed a trick really. What would have improved this piece is if they'd actually given some thought to decorating these pieces, these bits here, so that, you know, when you look at that side, you can actually still see that, but there's nothing on it. And the same if I turn it round, this side's really nice, but what about that? They could have done the back of that. We've got the span thing there. You could have made it two-dimensional and had the sort of back of it here. So that's something worth thinking about if you decide to make a slab pot that's got two sides that are not the same shape. The next one we're going to look at, we're moving up a little bit now in complexity, because we've got a one here which is, obviously this is something that someone's made that's based on a musical theme. We've got a treble clef here, and we've got musical staves, we've got a keyboard here. Now with this, again, both sides of the pot are different, so the shape of the sides is different. On this one we've got a guitar. Now we've got bits that kind of move away from the block shape here, and if I hold this up you can see that this person's put like a support in the back to support that bit. It's just a slab of clay, a triangle of clay that's been joined on, scored, slipped like we've talked about, and then a little bit of coil put around, so that will support that. It makes it nice and strong. And it's also, they've also done it on the top part of the treble clef. What makes this one quite complex is that the shapes are quite different, so that when this person has thought about how these are going to go together, they've had to put one paper template down, the other one on top, and work out where these walls can go. And again, that's resulted in that slightly narrow shape in the middle that holds them apart. To talk about the decoration on this one, this side has got incised or carved decoration, so we've got the guitar shape, the guitar strings. The only bit of applied where we've got little bits of slab stuck to the surface of the pot are the keys of the keyboard that runs around the edge. We've got an oxide wash on this with a celadon glaze, which gives this green and copper red. This one's been fired in the gas kiln, so they're really quite nice colours, very subtle but very nice and very effective. On this side we've got incised decoration, and then we've got, this is where it gets really clever. You know, this is the sort of thing that if you're looking for more marks that you should be thinking about, because we've got the treble clef, which has been cut out of a scrap piece of clay, perhaps rolled a little thinner than the clay that we used to make the pot. The treble clef's been stuck onto the surface of the pot. Then we've had another piece of clay stuck on for the keyboards, and then the third level, or actually it's the fourth level, is we've got the actual, what would be the black keys of a keyboard, stuck on top of those. So if you think about it in terms of levels of decoration, we've got 1, and then a second. The third one is the actual surface of the pot, and the fourth level is the incisions. So the decoration on this works on 4 levels: the incised, the surface of the pot, the first level of applied work, and then the second level of applied clay, which are the keys. So when someone is looking at this, they can think, well, we've got 2 quite complex shapes. The person that's made this has worked out how to put them together. Then when they've come around to decorate it, they've got a theme that runs across both sides. It's a musical theme. Both sides are different, and particularly on this side, we've got a much more complex way of decorating it. So that would gain much higher marks than the first one that we looked at. The last one that I want to show you is different again. It's different because it's made out of a slightly different clay, but that's neither here nor there. The technique of making it is exactly the same. And this one's not glazed either. It's been fired to a glazed temperature, but the only colour decoration is in the form of an oxide wash that's been put on it. This time we've got 2 different shapes. That's one side of the pot. This is the other side of the pot. Very fluid, very curvy shapes, but 2 completely different shapes. One thing I want to show you on this one is here. We can see that we've got a big piece sticking out there that would be left unsupported. Quite dangerous, really. So the person that's made this, again, has put one of those triangular supports in there that's just between the wall that keeps the sides apart and the side. That's going to keep that nice and safe. It's there for a purpose, but actually it does add something to the design, and it shows anyone who's looking at this that this person's really thought about what they're doing. The other thing, if we look at the decoration, on this one, on this side only, we've got incised decoration, which is carving, and then we've got this painted on decoration with the oxide. The thing that I like about this is a 6th form piece, so we would hope that it's a little bit more sophisticated, is that the 2 forms of decoration, the incisions and then the painting, are not necessarily on top of each other. So the person did the incised decoration, but then just didn't fill the lines in. They painted another image and almost disregarded the lines. So although this is flat, apart from the incision, it's a more sophisticated image because of the way that it's been chosen to be decorated. And then if we look to the other side, now we've got even more here now. We've got the actual flat surface of the clay. We've got some carving here, which is really quite subtle. I don't know whether you can see that. Then we've got some applied clay. So these shapes have been cut out of either a thin slab, and actually these have been extruded through one of the small syringe things that we've got. We've got some stars. These have all been stuck on. So these bits are proud of the surface of the pot. Some of them have been coloured and some of them have been left. So it's all a case of the actual amount of options that have been used in making this piece. So we can go from something which is very simple, like this, simple yet very effective, and then we can go up in levels of complexity. We've got this one where we've got 2 different shapes but only one kind of decoration. Then we've got this one where we've got 2 different shapes that are really quite different, and an even more sophisticated level of decoration because we've got more layers to it. And then finally we've got this one which sort of puts all these ideas together. As I say, slab building is a really quite simple in some ways method of construction, but can be used to great effect. As with most things, the amount of planning that goes into it will bear fruit. If you have an idea what you're going to do before you start, obviously you need that because you need this, you need a template before you begin. But how you actually want to decorate something, it does pay dividends in the end.